Hello, world. Welcome to episode 10 of the Last Comic Book Standing podcast. We made it 10 episodes deep. We're off to a good start. And I just want to thank each and every one of you that has been supporting us through our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The interactions have been really cool in the last couple of weeks. And everyone that's subscribed to our YouTube channel where you're watching this right now, remember to like the video below, subscribe to the channel. Remember, we are on the road to 100 subscribers. Why is that important again? As I said in my last video, once you get to 100 subscribers, you can customize your URL. And the only thing I want for Christmas this year is to be able to change our hyperlink to youtube.com/thelastcomicbookstanding. How cool would that be? So we're halfway there. Keep it going, guys. And this week, we're reviewing Powers of X number 5. So we are almost at the finale of the storylines. It's a 6-part miniseries for each book. We're going to get into number 5, and the following 2 weeks, we're going to see how this thing wraps up. The writer, Jonathan Hickman, has been doing a phenomenal job. The artists, such as R.B. Silva, who's responsible for this cover, they've been doing an amazing job at the artwork. Some of the best artwork I've seen in years. And at $5 a pop, I hope they're getting paid as well. So let's get right into it. Okay, so a quick recap. In the last issue of Powers of X, the Professor and Magneto met with a character named Mr. Sinister and requested the cataloging of all mutant DNA. We learned about the origins of Krakoa Island and how the professor spearheaded the development of a new language to communicate with it, and saw that 1,000 years into the future, a character named the Elder offered the world to a group known as the Phalanx in order to achieve a process they call ascension. On the cover of this issue, we see Mr. Sinister standing in front of a few of those mutant eggs where a few clones are emerging, and a quote from Professor X. They think we are doing one thing, but the truth is we are doing something altogether different. This chapter begins with a meeting during year 1 between the professor and an X-Men named Forge. Forge is the techie guy. He's the geek squad of the X-Men. Professor X is picking his brain about the possibility of advancing his helmet, Cerebro, to not only be able to locate mutants anywhere in the world, but also copy and create backups of their minds. They're going through the logistics of making something like this and the energy requirements they need to meet, along with the practical questions like how often are you needing to create these backups, along with finding a way to store this information, basically enough hard drive space. Professor X then tells him he'd like to have 5 backups, and tells Forge that there is an invisible alien power source that is orbiting the Earth that'll meet their energy requirements. And as far as their hard drive, they'll be using something called Shiar Diamonds. Now, the Shiar Empire is this advanced galactic civilization that Professor X befriended throughout the years, and these 2 objects are a part of their technology. What stood out to me here is the look on Professor's face. It's someone determined to put together all the pieces of a puzzle to achieve their ultimate goal, perhaps no matter the cost. Now we move to year 10, the famous Louvre Museum. Inside, we see the museum cleared by a telepathic order from the professor, leaving only Emma Frost, the White Queen. Magneto and the professor approach her, and she asks them what's the purpose of meeting with her, and how whenever they're together, it's either really great news or something super risky. Emma wants them to get to the point, so Professor X explains that he needs her help, and since she's a member of the Hellfire Corporation, think of them as a very influential company with global reach that isn't afraid to bend the rules and get their hands dirty. He tells her that they have these miracle drugs, which they're developing in Krakoa, and are planning to use the demand for these medicines to make Krakoa a sovereign mutant nation. Emma has a problem with having all mutants live on one island, as they would be easy targets, and she wants no part of it. They explain they need her help more with forming the government for the island, and they estimate having a population of 2 million by the following year. In an effort to address her concerns, they show Emma a flower from the island which produces these new medicines, and then she visits the island itself. Emma is so hesitant because she was there when millions of mutants were killed on an island called Genosha, which was promoted as the next big civilization of mutants. So Emma has heard all of this before, but once she sees Krakoa for herself, she agrees to work with them and asks what they're looking to have her do to help. They explain the process of how the medicines are being produced and how they want the Hellfire Corporation to be their distributor. They work out the terms and offer the corporation a lucrative, exclusive deal and 2 seats on their future Krakoan government council. When she asks why 2, they explain they want her to include a character named Sebastian Shaw. This guy is the Dick Cheney of the X-Men world. He doesn't think twice about destroying people, nations, double-crossing others, all for his personal gain. It's probably the last person Emma wants to deal with, but they explain that with the countries that want to do business with them, Emma will be their liaison for trade. She'll basically be their sales rep. And for the countries that are against Krakoa and have no intention of being allies, they'll use Sebastian Shaw to be their sales rep through the black market. And Emma, being the intelligent businesswoman she is, understands the high stakes. And instead of agreeing to do it in exchange for 2 seats in the new government, she requests 3. We then see Professor X begin to contact and summon all the mutants in the planet to the island of Krakoa, asking them to put aside their differences, and assures them that they will be safe and stand strong as one people, one nation, strength in numbers. But then we see an image of an underwater city, and someone responding to the professor being extremely sarcastic about it. We see that it's Namor, who's basically the ruler of the seas and the underwater world. He's like, let me get this straight. You're asking all mutants, good and evil, to live on an island and work together in perfect harmony? Professor says yes, and we want you to be a part of it. Namor continues by saying that Professor has finally realized that humans will always despise mutants because they're superior to them, and that's the reason for their hatred of all mutants. But then he tells the professor that he's known that for quite some time already, that he realized a long time ago that he's above humans, and he's insulted that the professor is just figuring this out, but that he also feels the professor doesn't really believe in what he's preaching. So he dismissed him and tells him to come back when he's being genuine and truthful about the whole thing. Now we're in year 1000. We see this character of the Elder who is awaiting the response of the Phalanx group if they're accepting their world into their advanced civilization, if they will be absorbed into them and become a part of their collective intelligence. Imagine a river that runs into the ocean. That river then ceases to exist and becomes the ocean. The Phalanx respond and say yes and destroy the Elder. We then see the Nimrod drone, who's the future version of the Ultimate Sentinel machine, explain what happens next. This is probably the most complicated portion of these issues, so bear with me. The drone explains that machines evolve just like humans, and they can get to a point where they're always improving and replicating better versions of themselves and can control all the power in the solar system. Well, the drone says the Phalanx operate in a similar way. It explains that as most machines are made by other machines, the Phalanx are created from elements in the universe, matter, particles, electrons, so on and so forth. It goes on to explain because of how highly advanced these Phalanx are, coupled with the fact that they are biological beings as well, they're so intelligent that the only way they could hold that intelligence is by having brains that are so dense that they could begin to affect time and space around them. And it poses a very interesting question. What is a black hole? That perhaps every Phalanx brain is holding so much information and becoming so dense that it becomes a black hole. And that black holes are not individual from each other, that they're actually connected like a web across the universe, a giant web of intelligence. Lastly, it reveals that this process of gathering planets and worlds come at a price. That yes, all the intelligence and wisdom and consciousness of a world is acquired by them and ultimately added to their greater pool. But the price is that the process requires energy. The phalanx need to feed. And so with each ascension comes the complete absorption and destruction of that world, leaving no living thing behind. Total annihilation. Does that term sound familiar? Isn't that what the machines have done timeline after timeline? Things are about to get really interesting. We end with a quote from Namor. When you see me again, understand what that means. So for this week's song, I chose to go with Deftones Change in the House of Flies. When I'm reading these stories, it's all about pace and emotion. Does the music I'm listening to match the pace of the story and the emotion conveyed all together? And for me, this track does that perfectly. The Deftones are a legendary band. Check them out. If you've never heard this song, it was actually on the Queen of the Dam soundtrack. So hopefully you can add it to your own playlist. So what'd you guys think? Pretty cool, right? So we're seeing how Professor's helmet was modified and worked on to be able to copy and clone these mutant minds. And we're also seeing how the government side of Krakoa is being developed, which is really cool. Now, what I'm curious about is that conversation between Professor and Namor and what that's going to end up being. Namor just basically hit him with a truth bomb. I've been known I'm superior to mankind, and I don't really believe this story that you're feeding me, so come back when you want to really keep it 100. That conversation is going to lead up to something. None of these pieces of the story are random. The Phalanx, we're understanding that they devour worlds, but absorb the intelligence and the consciousness of every sentient being on that planet. They're world eaters, basically. But at the same time, the deal is you evolve with them. You become part of a greater galactic kind of collective. So I'm really interested to see what that really means. And I think that portion's going to be really important leading up to the finale of the storylines. And we're also going to see what role that plays in the entirety of the story. So I'm really excited. So I can't wait to see what happens. Join us next week for episode 11. We're going to be reviewing House of X number 6. And as always, be excellent to each other. Take care.